Beach FM, locals talking to locals.
Beach FM, and this is Mental Health Awareness Week. I'd like to make very welcome now a man who's been on this radio quite a few times, although not for a year or two. He used to be a regular on the Time Machine when we had the 3 programs per week. But Martin Sloman, it is wonderful to welcome you back to Beach FM.
Always nice to talk to you, John.
Since last we talked, it seems as if mental health has become much more appreciated within the community. We've had the Royal Commission. It's become part of the political lexicon. Has much changed in reality in the field?
I think there's, from the positive side of things, I think generally there's a bit more awareness out there within the general public and within the media around mental health and the importance of looking after our mental health. I think it's still a wait and see in terms of the outcomes of the Royal Commission and looking to see the changes that are being proposed turn into something that truly impacts our community. I think we've still got many of the same challenges. Much of those challenges are around access to mental health, affordability,
yes,
and also resourcing in terms of the people that are working within the field being able to provide simply enough of people like
yourself
and other clinicians. Yeah. So we've still got those challenges, I think, and I think unfortunately with the COVID situation, then we've got definitely we've got a lot more issues going on for people, which are going to require more support, I think, as we go forward through this.
How are those issues related to COVID-19 manifesting themselves?
Well, there's all sorts of different ways. I think initially when we went into lockdown, lots of people kind of just buckled up and got on with what was important to do, and that's things like making sure there's food on the table, making sure your families are looked after, and in some ways looking after one's own mental health took a bit of a back seat or further down the priority list. But as that time has passed and we've got back into our lives and we start to realise the impacts, I think some of the things that were there before that people were going through, so there might have been relationship tensions, anxieties, fears about job security, those sorts of things, those things have been amplified. And what that's meant is that more people are now looking for support, perhaps where they weren't looking for support before, and the intensity of what they need has gone up significantly.
Is there any difference in the age group reaction to COVID-19?
I'd say not. I'd say it's across the board. I am seeing quite a lot of young people who are increasingly worried, and I think some of these people have been impacted more directly early doors. So you've got young people worried about their futures, about college, about all the things, I guess, that were kind of fairly well set in stone for them before COVID. Now all of a sudden a lot of things have got question marks. So there's some issues around that. And I know from speaking to my colleagues who are working out there in the field, there are sort of tailbacks in terms of the service providers for young people. And actually, across the board, to be honest, we're all actually booked up. I'm booked up for many weeks ahead now, and it's never been quite that busy. So,
goodness.
Yeah, it is a tough time out there.
Very tough. The reason I ask the question is that, yes, I do suspect it's very tough for young people who have had the ground shift from beneath their feet. I, as you know, have work to do with some of the older community, and it seems to me as if many of them have rolled with the punches remarkably well. And I suspect it's because they have been around a bit. There have been some ups and downs, and just between you and me, Martin, I think many of them accepted and, in fact, maybe even enjoyed the somewhat simpler life there was under lockdown.
Yeah, I think that's a reasonable point. I think also we have to be mindful that for many of our young people, this is the first major crises that they've ever lived through, whereas, of course, many of our older people have already been through other sort of incidents or crises, even at this sort of scale before. So there's a sense of they were more accepting of the situation and more accepting of the things that we needed to do to try and look after ourselves. I think that the other thing to bear in mind there is that I think many of our older people have become very good at isolating themselves and keeping themselves out of the community. And that's double-edged. So yes, that keeps them safe, but on the other hand, it creates perhaps issues around loneliness and social isolation. And I think it's really important that we don't exclude them from our thoughts or even from our actions just because we don't see them quite so much.
So just as the cabin fever, where you had people who maybe had relationship issues, just as they were cooped up and some of those issues may have become amplified, similarly with the older people, the social isolation in itself may have become more severe.
Absolutely, and I think never has there been more of a need for human kindness in our communities than now. I was talking to someone the other day who was delivering free produce from the Waikanae Beach, Foursquare. And the chap was telling me that some of the things he was delivering to the old people, he would be the only person that they would see.
Yes.
And that delivery was not just beneficial in terms of getting groceries delivered, but also in terms of communication and socialization, just being able to spend a few minutes talking to people on the doorstep or whatever. So it's these sorts of things. I think it's these little things that we can all do a little bit more of and make a big difference to those people who are struggling.
Yes, I've found it can be quite difficult getting away from some of the old codgers. They want to solve all the problems of the world, and you can absolutely understand why. The other thing is, you mentioned the person delivering groceries. There's this wonderful effort, Sophie Hanford and the rest of the students, the student army, and that wonderful effort, that intergenerational effort, reaching out between the generations. I think that must have done a lot of good in itself.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think any endeavours like that, which really encourage people to look out for their friends and neighbours in whatever form, is hugely welcome. We have a really big community, a very kind community, and I think sometimes with a bit of facilitation, people will be more than happy to roll their sleeves up and get involved. A little plug, actually, if I may, John, for the Kapiti Kindness Trust.
Oh, yes.
Which is a new charity which I've been involved with, which is actually focusing specifically on that, on the concept of kindness, and really kind of showcasing the people in our community that do awesome things for their fellow citizens. So if people want to look more about that sort of stuff, hop onto the website or hop onto the Facebook page, and you can see all of the sort of awesome things that we're getting people to tell us about that's already happening in our community. And I think the more of that we can do, the best kind of contagion that we can create, then we can help each other and get along.
And I put it to Martin that resilience, both personal and within the community, is enormously important.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, I'm a huge advocate for resilience. I think the reality is that if we only ever focus on trying to help people after they've become unwell, we will never actually get on top of this. What we actually need to do is ensure that people have the awareness, the skills, the motivation, the prioritization to look after themselves in their day-to-day before they start to get unwell, and therefore preventing that from happening. And it's things like kindness, it's things like putting time into your passions, communication, having great relationships with people. We're not meant to be living separate from each other. We're meant to be together as a species. And doing these things and being aware of these things is a great antidote towards ever getting the kind of level of unwell that you might need a service, which might be swamped and not able to support you. So I think it's all about, not so much the fence at the bottom of the top of the cliff, but it's about having your activities so far away from the edge of the cliff that you never even know that you get to the edge of the cliff.
You seem to be implying that the safety net is a little bit frayed at the moment, Martin. We need more people involved.
The safety net is definitely frayed, and I think anyone who works at the coalface, whether it's counselling, mental health, social work, or the food, all of the different things that actually provide services for people in need, they consistently are saying that the demand is getting more increased. So we do need to do much more earlier in the piece before we actually try and rely on those services. Because of the danger they'll become just swamped and not able to cope with that. So, but in general terms, even without the sort of post-COVID or COVID type stuff, I think it's the right way to go is to talk about resilience and talk about living well, living meaningfully, and having fulfilling lives and doing what we can to take responsibility for that, both for ourselves and also in terms of supporting other people as well.
When we used to talk some years ago, I remember you used to fret about the staunch, taciturn Kiwi bloke who was too proud or too stupid to reach out and say, hey, I need a bit of help. Has that improved at all over the years or not?
Yeah, I think it has. I think in terms of, if I think about my clinical practice, I probably see as many chaps as I do ladies. So certainly there's certainly more willingness for that to happen. I think something like Whirlwind, which I've been involved with now for 11 years, has made a difference because it does create, at least at a local level, a peer support mechanism which allows for men to come and engage and accept that looking out for each other and talking about ourselves as men is a perfectly normal and healthy thing to do. So I think in our local community, I think it has got better. There'll still always be, a way to go on that. But there are some encouraging signs. We've still got a lot more work to do, and there are a few sort of plans that I'm involved with which might engage some of our more reluctant men a bit more to reach out and get the support they need when they need it.
To many men, what they are, their identity, is their job. And we're in the first recession we've had in this country for over a decade. Anyone with half a glass eye can see that the next few years are going to be really, really tough, and that jobs are going to be, a moving kind of date. And that's going to be difficult, particularly for men to deal with, I suspect. Do you think that in terms of mental health, that we're in for a rough run as well?
Yeah, I think we are. I think that will obviously impact on a lot of men, but I think it's just going to impact on a lot of people, to be fair.
Yes.
I think the opportunity that comes out of this, and it's for those people perhaps a bit higher up than my pay grade, is to look at how we work and live as a community that perhaps doesn't have quite as much perhaps foreign investment or foreign tourism and all the things that we've relied on in the past. We've got to look at the new way of doing things. For example, in my own industry, I've 99% of the people I used to see pre-COVID would be face-to-face. There's a significant proportion now that would actually prefer to do a virtual session, a Zoom or a Skype type medium. Simply because there's a convenience attached to that, but there's also it helps people feel a little bit safer not to have to keep travelling around quite so much. So I think we've got to look at the way in which we do things and how we can provide the roles, different services that we do, and using things like technology to help us do it better and perhaps more safely.
When you talked about people with the higher wage grade, here we are in one of the strangest elections I can ever remember. It feels less like an election and more like a coronation the more you go into it. But last election, mental health was certainly something that was discussed a lot. I haven't heard of it being discussed this time. You seem to be implying that there are real issues to be solved here at the political, at the higher pay grade level.
Yeah,
do you think now
absolutely.
is the time to put up our plate and say, come on, let's get serious. We've had the nice words. Let's get some action.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think what's happened because of the inevitability of the focus on the economic situation and the health situation in terms of COVID health as opposed to mental health. We have it's kind of moved sideways from being very high up the political agenda to being sort of slightly forgotten about, and that's a little bit naive because I think there's going to be an enormous surge of mental health need that's going to come, especially as things like the economic recession bites and people start to lose jobs or be challenged around income and lifestyle. And I think that we need to be prepared for that, and we need to be ready for it, because otherwise we may actually be caught without the resources that we need in place to deal with what I regard as an inevitable sort of tsunami of mental health need. And you've got all the ingredients there, John. You've got issues around social economic problems. You've got housing issues. You've got all of the things that come with a recession. And of course, those things are bad in themselves, but the impact on mental health is potentially enormous. And so we do need to be prepared for that.
Mental Health Awareness Week, let's just hope that there is a little bit more action that comes. Seems to me that we really badly need the resources to deal with something that I'm sure all of us are aware of, if not within ourselves, within our whānau. It's been lovely catching up once again, Martin. I really admire the work you've done with the Kindness Trust and that amazing Whirlwind operation.
Thank you, John.
And I admire the work that you're doing in your practice as well. It's wonderful to have you as part of our community. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you.
Thanks so much, John. You look after yourself.
106.3 Beach FM.